Are you feeling that quiet itch inside, the kind that asks if there's more to life than just your to-do lists and the little notifications that boss you around all day? It sneaks up on you when you're brushing your teeth, or halfway through a meeting where someone's talking about quarterly reports but your mind is whispering, something else is calling you. Maybe it's not loud, not even clear, but it's there. What if those whispers weren't random noise but something ancient, something deep, a compass that's been waiting for you to notice? Imagine this. You make choices without overthinking them to death, you know when to say yes and when to step away, and your path feels less like wandering in circles and more like following a subtle thread that's always been in your hands. This isn't about fortune-telling or woo-woo tricks, it's about intuition, your ability to know without knowing how you know. And once you learn to listen, life begins to feel more like a flow than a constant push. Right now, picture yourself moving through the dim light of evening, the room wrapped in soft quiet, your body heavier with rest but your mind curious. You probably won't know this, but your brain is actually making tiny predictions every second, little backstage calculations that spill out as hunches. That weird feeling in your stomach? Not so random after all. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. Now, you're sitting with the sound of those whispers beneath the noise. The hum of your fridge, the faint traffic outside, maybe even the low buzz of your own mind. Beneath all that clutter, you start to notice subtler signals. A gentle pulse in your chest when you think of one choice over another, a tiny lightness in your body when an idea feels right. You don't need a neon sign flashing, correct answer. Instead, your inner knowing has been trailing breadcrumbs for years. Psychologists call this thin slicing, and one famous study from Malcolm Gladwell's beloved research pool showed that people could predict a teacher's effectiveness from just a few seconds of silent video. Think about that, your mind pulls in tiny slices of data, too quick to consciously tally, and somehow stitches them into a whole impression. It's not magic, it's pattern recognition on fast forward. But when you're caught up in busyness, those microsignals get drowned out like a whisper in a stadium. A quirky side note for you, in ancient Greece, people believed the gut was literally the seat of decision-making. Oracles would read animal entrails as if wisdom lived in the folds of intestines. It sounds bizarre now, but admit it, you've used the phrase, gut feeling, and meant every word. Turns out they weren't entirely wrong. Your enteric nervous system and #40, basically a mini brain in your belly and #41, does play a role in signaling emotions and guiding choices. So yes, your stomach might actually know more than you think. That leads to a question researchers still argue about: is intuition truly separate from rational thought, or just the speedy cousin of reasoning? There remains considerable disagreement about whether these whispers are fundamentally unconscious logic or if they tap into a different channel of awareness altogether. And you sit in that gray zone, experiencing both. Sometimes it feels logical in disguise, sometimes it feels like lightning from nowhere. You can sense the irony here. You've been trained most of your life to think things through, to analyze, to weigh pros and cons spreadsheets, planners, bullet points. And yet, the choices that stick, who you love, where you feel at home, whether you say yes to a leap, often arrive as quiet certainty, long before the pros and cons list catches up. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly known whether you were safe or not, you know what I mean. As you drift further into this moment, picture yourself standing in a forest. The sounds are hushed except for the wind through the trees. You feel a path under your feet. You don't need a map, you just somehow know which way to go. That feeling isn't irrational, it's your mind decoding subtle clues, the way the soil is pressed, the faint smell of water nearby. But in your experience, it simply feels like inner guidance. Now, a little humor here, because this could get too lofty. Intuition isn't about guessing lottery numbers. If it were, you'd be sipping cocktails on a private island instead of listening to this voice. Your inner compass isn't a fortune machine, it's more like a quiet friend who knows you better than you realize. Of course, that friend sometimes whispers, "Buy more snacks," when what you actually need is sleep, so it's not infallible. But as you notice these whispers, you begin to trust them more. They show up when you least expect them, on a crowded subway, in the pause before sending a message, in that dreamy space just before sleep. And every time you listen, you strengthen the connection, like tuning a radio away from static toward a clear signal. That awareness carries you deeper. Beneath the clamor of opinions, expectations, and endless digital noise, you begin to feel an older rhythm, a quieter wisdom. You realize you've had this all along, not as a mystical superpower, but as part of being human. And as that realization settles, another layer of the journey waits, one that bridges your everyday gut sense with the fascinating science behind it. Because that shift in energy naturally draws you toward the next question: what's really happening in your brain and body when intuition sparks? Now that you've tuned into those whispers beneath the noise, you're probably curious: what's actually happening in your brain and body when intuition shows up? It feels mysterious, like a sudden knowing, but psychologists and neuroscientists have been busy poking around, trying to map the circuitry behind those gut feelings. Spoiler alert, your intuition isn't magic, it's speed. It's your brain crunching information faster than your conscious mind can follow, and then handing you the result in a neat little, aha, package. Imagine this: your brain is like a hyperactive librarian who sees someone walk into the library and instantly recalls hundreds of similar visitors, what they borrowed, and how they behaved. While you're still thinking, oh, a stranger just walked in, your intuition is already whispering, you can trust this one, or something feels off. That's because your brain has already matched patterns, cross-referenced details, and spat out a feeling before you could consciously process it. One well-known psychological study, conducted by Antonio Damasio and colleagues, used the famous Iowa gambling task to explore this. Participants picked cards from different decks, some good, some disastrous. Long before they consciously realized which decks were bad, their bodies were already reacting: sweaty palms, faster heartbeats, subtle discomfort. Their intuition flagged the danger well before their reasoning caught on. Basically, your nervous system is like an overeager spoiler friend. It knows how the story ends and blurts out the feeling before the rest of your mind can catch up. Here's something interesting: your brain actually has two primary processing tracks, one slow and deliberate, the other fast and automatic. Daniel Kahneman popularized this idea with his System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 is your intuitive side, lightning fast, emotional, efficient, but sometimes sloppy. System 2 is the careful one, slow, rational, energy hungry, and better at detailed analysis. When you get that hunch, it's often System 1 nudging you. The funny part is, System 2 usually comes along afterward and pretends it was in charge the whole time. A quirky bonus fact for you: chess grandmasters can recognize the best move in a position almost instantly, not by calculating every possible outcome, but by recalling thousands of patterns stored in memory. To outsiders, it looks like mystical intuition, like they can see 10 moves ahead. But in reality, it's years of rapid pattern recognition disguised as a flash of inner knowing. In other words, their gut is backed by an absurd amount of practice. This raises a fascinating point that has sparked significant intellectual debate: is intuition only as reliable as the experiences that shaped it? If your pattern library is built on bias or limited exposure, can you really trust it? Some scholars argue intuition is only as good as the data you've lived through, while others suggest there's more, some kind of universal unconscious connection. And so, you live in the tension, knowing your hunches might be brilliant, but also aware they're not always gospel. Let's pause here for a laugh, because things are getting too heavy. Intuition may help you choose a career, but it also tells you, quite wrongly, that eating another slice of pizza at midnight will definitely make you happier. Your gut might know danger, but it's still an optimist about leftover food. So yes, your inner compass has blind spots. Still, the science doesn't strip away the magic, it makes it richer. Think of the vagus nerve, for example. This wandering superhighway connects your brain and body, carrying constant updates. That twinge in your stomach when you sense someone's lying? It's your vagus nerve lighting up, transmitting unease from belly to brain in milliseconds. You feel it as intuition, but it's really an embodied warning system. As you drift deeper into this thought, you start to notice how intuition doesn't speak in words. It's a shiver, a sigh, a quickening pulse. You can't logic it into existence, it bubbles up. And while it may not always be perfect, it's astonishingly adaptive. It helps you dodge cars before you've consciously registered them, pick up on a friend's mood before they've said a word, or sense when a deal feels just a little too polished. Here's another image. Your brain is like a nightclub with two entrances. The rational door is guarded by a clipboard-wielding bouncer named Logic who checks IDs and makes everyone wait in line. The intuitive door? That's a back alley where emotions, sensations, and quick impressions sneak right in, already dancing before logic even notices. You need both doors. Without the back alley, the club would be empty. Without the front door, it'd be chaos. And that balance is what brings you back to yourself. You realize intuition isn't meant to replace thinking. It's meant to work alongside it, offering quick, embodied flashes of insight that reasoning can then refine. You don't have to choose one or the other, you just have to know when to lean on each. But here's the challenge, you rarely pause long enough to notice those signals. You rush, you scroll, you multitask, and the whispers get buried under noise. Cultivating intuition means slowing down just enough to hear them. That's the doorway to the next layer, your dreams, your symbols, and the strange nudges that emerge when your conscious mind finally loosens its grip. As your thoughts drift further, another doorway opens, the one you walk through every night without realizing how strange and powerful it really is. Dreams, symbols, little nudges from your subconscious. This is where intuition often dresses up in costumes, acting out scenes you didn't ask for but can't stop remembering. You wake up thinking, why on earth was I talking to my high school math teacher while riding a giant jellyfish? And yet, a part of you feels that the dream meant something. When your rational mind is finally off duty, your subconscious throws a party. Images and archetypes come spilling out, water, animals, doors, shadows. You don't need to believe in dream dictionaries to feel their pull. A dream of losing your voice might not literally predict anything, but it nudges you to notice how silenced you feel in waking life. A recurring image of an endless staircase doesn't hand you answers, it reflects how your mind interprets the climb you're on. Psychologists have long studied this mysterious terrain. One famous example comes from Carl Jung, who proposed that certain symbols, snakes, rivers, the wise old stranger, aren't just personal but belong to a collective unconscious. These symbols carry shared meaning across cultures, whispering to you from deeper layers of the psyche. Whether you buy into Jung's mystical framing or not, you've probably felt the truth of it. A dream about drowning shakes you awake in a way no spreadsheet ever could. An odd but true fact, some people experience precognitive dreams, where elements of the future show up before they happen. Statistically, skeptics say it's just coincidence plus your brain's tendency to weave connections after the fact. Still, you might hear someone swear, I dreamed of this conversation before it happened. The debate rages on. Are these dreams random sparks or something more? Scientists remain divided, with some seeing mere pattern matching while others leave room for mysteries we can't yet measure. This leads us into a long-standing controversy. Are dreams just your brain tossing out random static as it consolidates memory, or are they meaningful stories stitched together to guide your waking self? Some argue it's purely housekeeping, your neurons doing spring cleaning while you sleep. Others believe the dream world is a rehearsal ground, a safe sandbox where your mind tests scenarios and primes your intuition. And somewhere in between sits the possibility that both are true. Dreams are messy and profound, noise and signal. Imagine this, you dream you're walking into a crowded room, but suddenly everyone turns to look at you. You wake up anxious. In waking life, you might realize you've been worrying about judgment from your peers. Your subconscious turned that fear into theater. It's not prophecy, it's your brain's creative way of flagging what you've been ignoring. Intuition slips into those images, offering you metaphors that your waking mind might have dismissed. Here's a quirky comparison. Your subconscious is like that friend who only communicates through memes. It doesn't send you a direct text saying, you're anxious about work. No, it sends you a dream where you're late for a flight, your luggage turns into a fish tank, and your boss is the pilot. It's absurd, but once you sit with it, the emotional truth surfaces. And scientists have found that people who pay attention to their dreams often score higher on measures of intuitive decision-making. One study observed that participants who engaged in dream journaling reported stronger gut confidence in their daily lives. It's as though keeping track of those nighttime dramas tunes your ear to the whispers of your inner knowing. Of course, not all dreams are wise. Sometimes they're just your brain serving up leftover soup from your day. Did you binge watch a detective series? Congratulations, now you're chasing villains across rooftops in REM sleep. Did you stress about your inbox? Suddenly you're drowning in a sea of unopened emails. Your subconscious loves a remix, and it's not always profound. Still, even the silly dreams remind you that your mind is always processing, always weaving connections. And when you step back, you realize that intuition and dreaming share a stage, both bypass linear logic, both arrive suddenly, both use images and feelings instead of step-by-step reasoning. Whether or not you write them down, your dreams are training grounds for your intuitive sense. Let's lighten this with a smile. You know you've had that dream, the one where you show up to class without pants, only to realize you haven't been in school for years. On the surface, ridiculous. Underneath, though, it's your subconscious spotlighting a universal fear of exposure. See? Even your most embarrassing dreams are just intuition dressed in clown shoes. So tonight, as you sink into sleep, you'll remember that your inner knowing doesn't just whisper in the day, it also paints in the dark. And as that awareness lingers, it leads naturally into the next revelation. Your intuition isn't only in your head. It lives in your body too, your breath, your pulse, even the tiny twitch of a muscle when you're about to say yes or no. You notice now how much of your intuition doesn't even speak in thoughts, it lives in your body. That soft tug in your chest when something feels right, the clenching in your stomach when something's off, the way your shoulders sink with relief when you make a choice that finally aligns. You don't have to wait for a dream or a voice in your head, your body has been carrying an entire language of signals all along. Think about it, how many times have you said, "I just felt it in my bones," or, "My heart told me so"? Those aren't empty phrases, they're reflections of real physiological shifts. Your heart rate, your breathing pattern, even the microtensions in your muscles respond faster than your conscious brain can process. Before you even form the thought, your body's already broadcasting the headline. One classic psychological study comes from John Bargh in his research on embodied cognition. He found that people who held a warm cup of coffee were more likely to judge strangers as warm and friendly, compared to those holding iced coffee. Your physical state literally colors your perception, slipping into your judgments as if your body were whispering its opinion straight into your mind. Your intuition leans heavily on this hidden conversation between sensation and interpretation. Now, a little surprise for you, your skin actually has specialized cells called Merkel's cells that act like tiny pressure detectors. These aren't just about touch, they're part of why you can sense someone standing behind you before they speak. It's subtle, almost spooky, but it shows how much data your body is gathering and relaying in ways you don't consciously track. This raises an intriguing disagreement in the scientific community. Is bodily intuition simply a bundle of conditioned responses, like Pavlov's dogs drooling at a bell, or is there a deeper, innate intelligence in the body itself? Some argue it's all learned patterns. Your stomach clenches because past experience wired it that way. Others believe the body carries a primal knowing that precedes conscious reasoning. And so, the debate continues, with no clear finish line in sight. Meanwhile, you live with the evidence every day. You meet someone and instantly feel a spark of trust, or, conversely, a quiet warning hum. You walk into a house for the first time and somehow know whether it feels like home. These aren't thoughts you sat down and calculated, they're embodied flashes that tell you more than words could. Here's a playful comparison. Your body is like that coworker who never says much in meetings but constantly passes you sticky notes under the table. Sometimes they say, "This feels solid." Other times, "Abort mission." And if you ignore the notes long enough, your body raises the stakes with headaches, fatigue, or an inconvenient stomachache just to get your attention. Scientists have even linked intuitive gut feelings to the enteric nervous system, the second brain, in your digestive tract. It has over 100 million neurons, more than the spinal cord. That flutter you feel before speaking on stage? That's your second brain firing signals through the vagus nerve, telling you this moment matters. You might frame it as nerves, but it's also your inner compass saying, pay attention. Of course, the body doesn't always get it right. Let's be honest, your pounding heart before a first date doesn't mean impending doom, it just means your body hasn't mastered the art of chill. Sometimes your signals are exaggerated alarms, products of anxiety rather than wisdom. Your challenge is learning the difference between fear disguised as intuition and genuine gut truth. Here's a funny thought, your body's warning system is a bit like a smoke detector. It's brilliant at catching danger, but it also freaks out over burnt toast. Your intuition lives in that mix. You have to sniff the air yourself sometimes and decide whether it's an actual fire or just another overcooked bagel moment. Still, the body's wisdom is undeniable. Athletes often describe being in the zone, making split-second moves without conscious planning. Musicians slip into flow, fingers moving before thought. Surgeons, firefighters, and even chess players report the same. Their bodies react in ways that feel intuitive, guided by something deeper than deliberate reasoning. You've had flashes of this too, in everyday life, like when your hand reaches to steady a falling glass before you even notice it slipping. As you relax into this awareness, you realize intuition is not some ethereal thing floating above your head. It's grounded, physical, stitched into the rhythm of your heartbeat and the pace of your breath. And when you start to listen, really listen, you notice your body has been your compass all along. But that realization also comes with a caution. If your body is the compass, sometimes it points in confusing directions. Sometimes you mistake anxiety for wisdom, excitement for warning, or fear for prophecy. Which means the next step in your journey is equally important, facing the times when intuition gets it wrong, and how to tell the difference. Now comes the uncomfortable part, those moments when your intuition gets it flat out wrong. You've had them, the gut feeling that told you to trust someone who later betrayed you, the instinct that insisted you should turn left instead of right, the little nudge that ended up costing you more time, energy, or heartbreak than you care to admit. Intuition is powerful, yes, but it's also fallible, and learning its limits is just as important as learning its strengths. Think about the classic example of first impressions. You meet someone and instantly decide they're trustworthy, or not. Sometimes you're spot on. Other times, you later realize your snap judgment was based on something as superficial as their tone of voice or whether they looked like someone you once knew. Psychologists call this the halo effect, where one small detail clouds your entire perception. Your intuition loves shortcuts, but those shortcuts sometimes lead straight into the ditch. One famous study on this comes from Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, who explored cognitive biases like the availability heuristic. Your brain tends to judge likelihoods based on what comes easily to mind. For example, if you've recently watched a news story about plane crashes, your intuition might whisper that flying is dangerous, even though statistically, you're far safer in the air than on the road. Your gut isn't always lying, it's just being dramatic. A weird little bonus detail, casino designers actually exploit this. They carefully arrange slot machine sounds, flashing lights, and near-miss outcomes to trigger your intuitive sense of almost winning. Your body gets the rush of anticipation, your gut says, one more try. And the house smiles, because it knows the odds. Intuition, in this case, is being hacked by design. This leads into a thorny debate. Is intuition truly trustworthy as a decision-making tool, or is it mostly just bias in disguise? Scholars go back and forth. Some argue that intuition, honed by experience, can be incredibly accurate, like a firefighter sensing a building's collapse. Others caution that intuition without awareness often just amplifies stereotypes and emotional blind spots. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate, and the truth probably lies in a messy middle. Here's where the body comes back into play. Remember that stomach clench or heart flutter? Sometimes it signals danger. But sometimes it's just anxiety or excitement, misread as wisdom. Your intuition is like that friend who exaggerates everything. This date is going to be amazing, or this presentation will definitely end your career. It rarely whispers, this will be moderately fine. Learning to fact-check your intuition with logic is how you keep from falling into its drama. Of course, your inner compass has a sense of humor too. Have you ever been convinced your keys were stolen, only to find them in the fridge? That moment when your intuition insists you're cursed, but the truth is just, you were snacking distractedly? It's a reminder that your instincts can be dramatic storytellers. You can laugh at them, kindly, without losing respect for their usefulness. Another playful image: intuition is like GPS. Most of the time, it guides you smoothly. But sometimes it insists you drive into a lake because the route is faster. If you blindly follow, you're in trouble. If you learn to cross-check, look at the road signs, glance at the map, you can appreciate intuition's speed without being trapped by its errors. That's where awareness becomes essential. Instead of dismissing intuition as unreliable or worshipping it as flawless, you learn to ask, is this a true gut knowing, or just a fear in disguise? You pause, breathe, and notice. Does your body's signal calm you, even if it's firm? That often points to genuine intuition. Does it spike with panic, racing thoughts, and sweaty palms? That's usually fear hijacking the microphone. Still, don't be too hard on yourself for getting it wrong. Even experts stumble. Police officers misread suspects. Doctors overlook symptoms because their hunch points them elsewhere. Investors misjudge markets. And yet, none of them throw intuition away completely. They refine it, test it, balance it with reason. You can do the same. So maybe the joke's on all of us: intuition is less of a crystal ball and more of a weather forecast. Sometimes accurate, sometimes off by a day, and occasionally just wildly wrong, like predicting sunny skies while you're standing in a downpour. You still check the forecast, but you also keep an umbrella handy. That blend of humility and curiosity is what makes the journey richer. You realize intuition isn't about being perfect, it's about learning from its mistakes, noticing when it falters, and sharpening its edge. And when you begin training it, like a muscle, like a skill, you discover it becomes clearer, steadier, and more trustworthy. Which is exactly where you're headed next, into the practices that turn raw hunches into reliable inner guidance. Now you arrive at the part where your intuition starts feeling less like a random pop-up ad in your mind and more like a skill you can actually train. Yes, your inner knowing isn't fixed, it's flexible. You can shape it, sharpen it, and make it less of a drama queen and more of a steady guide. And the first step? Paying attention. Sounds simple, but attention is basically the gym membership your intuition's been waiting for. Think of mindfulness as your starting set of reps. When you sit still, focus on your breath, and notice your thoughts drifting by like clouds, you're not just calming yourself, you're clearing the static so subtle signals can break through. A Harvard study found that regular mindfulness meditation actually strengthens the insula, a part of the brain tied to interoception, a fancy word for sensing your inner body states. That means your body whispers get louder and clearer the more you practice tuning in. A little surprise fact: some elite military units have experimented with mindfulness training, not just for stress reduction, but to enhance intuitive decision-making in combat scenarios. The theory goes that a calmer, more attuned soldier can sense danger cues faster, like noticing a shift in the atmosphere before an ambush. Not exactly what your yoga teacher had in mind, but it shows how practical training your intuition can get. This sparks an ongoing scholarly debate. Is intuition improved by deliberate practice like meditation and journaling, or does trying too hard actually strangle it? Some researchers argue that focusing too much makes intuition vanish, like trying to remember a dream and watching it dissolve. Others counter that training strengthens your sensitivity, giving your gut a fighting chance against all the noise. The back and forth continues, but in practice, many people find mindful awareness helps intuition flourish. Now, back to you. Journaling is another training ground. When you write down your hunches, whether they prove right or wrong, you build a record. Patterns emerge. Maybe you'll notice that your yes feelings always carry a lightness in your chest, while your no hunches come as a heaviness in your stomach. Without writing, those subtleties slip past unnoticed. With journaling, they become your personal intuition dictionary. Here's a cheeky image for you. Your intuition is like a shy cat. If you stomp around the house shouting its name, it hides under the couch. But if you sit quietly, offer a lap, and stay patient, eventually it curls up beside you, purring away. Journaling, meditation, and simple quiet moments are your way of putting the bowl of milk out. Of course, training doesn't always mean sitting still. Sometimes it means deliberately engaging your senses. Walking without your phone, tasting food slowly, or noticing the exact shade of twilight in the sky, all of it hones your ability to catch subtleties. Intuition thrives on detail. The more detail you absorb, the more raw material your subconscious has to work with. Another odd but true tidbit: some athletes use visualization to train intuition. A basketball player might close their eyes and see themselves making free throws, imagining the ball's weight and the swoosh of the net. Later, when the real moment comes, their body reacts with uncanny accuracy. They've rehearsed the intuitive move until it's second nature. You can do this in your own life too: mentally rehearse conversations, choices, or paths, and your intuition builds muscle memory. Still, let's laugh a little, because otherwise this starts sounding too saintly. Training your intuition doesn't mean you'll suddenly wake up enlightened, gliding through life making perfect decisions while everyone applauds. No, sometimes it means realizing your gut is still confusing pizza cravings with existential clarity. But at least you'll notice faster, and you'll laugh instead of spiraling. And that's the real beauty of practice. It doesn't eliminate mistakes, it teaches you to see them quicker, recover sooner, and refine your signals. Over time, you learn to spot the difference between intuition that feels calm and grounded, and impulses that feel panicked and loud. That distinction is everything. So imagine this: you pause before a big decision. You close your eyes, breathe, and drop your awareness into your body. You notice the signals: a warmth in your chest when you think of one option, a tension in your throat when you think of the other. You jot it down, you reflect, and suddenly, clarity begins to flicker where confusion used to reign. That flicker grows brighter the more you practice. And slowly, your intuition stops being random static and starts becoming a trusted friend you can rely on. Which naturally leads to the next level, realizing that intuition isn't just personal. In groups, in teams, even in whole communities, something fascinating happens. The whispers multiply, synchronize, and sometimes lead everyone into flow together. As you drift further, you begin to sense that intuition isn't always a solo act. It can be shared, amplified, and woven into a collective rhythm. You felt it before, those moments when a group seems to move as one, when decisions click without endless debate, when trust hangs in the air like an invisible glue. That's collective intuition, and it shows up more often than you realize. Picture a jazz band improvising. No one pauses to explain what chord comes next, they just know. One player leans into a phrase, another follows, the drummer shifts tempo, and suddenly the entire group is flowing in unison. It's not telepathy, it's shared attention, trust, and a willingness to listen beyond words. The same thing happens in sports teams, in brainstorming sessions, even in families who can finish each other's sentences. Psychologists call this phenomenon group flow. A study by Keith Sawyer explored how collaboration can actually heighten creativity, with members feeding off each other's microsignals, gestures, tones, pauses. In those moments, intuition spreads like wildfire, sparking insights no single individual could have produced alone. It feels effortless, but it's really a delicate dance of attunement. A surprising little fact: even flocks of birds and schools of fish demonstrate this. Scientists found that starlings in murmuration patterns don't follow the whole flock. Each bird pays attention to just its 7 nearest neighbors. The result is that breathtaking wave-like motion across the sky. Translate that into human terms, and you get a sense of how small intuitive adjustments between individuals can ripple out into collective harmony. But, as always, scholars are split. Some argue that group intuition is simply the sum of individual instincts plus social cues, basically a fancy way of saying we copy each other. Others insist there's something emergent, something bigger than the parts, where the group itself becomes an intuitive organism. The question has sparked considerable debate, and no one's fully untangled it yet. Still, you've lived the reality of it. Think of a time when you were in a meeting, and without anyone saying it outright, everyone just knew the direction to take. Or when a group of friends silently decided to leave a party at the exact same moment. No discussion, no leader barking orders, just a collective hunch. That's group intuition at play. Of course, it's not foolproof. Collective intuition can also lead entire crowds astray. Herd mentality, mob psychology, financial bubbles, they're the shadow side of group knowing. When everyone tunes to the same wrong frequency, intuition becomes contagious in the worst way. History is full of examples of groups swept up in bad calls because no one stopped to question the current. Here's a lighthearted image. Group intuition is like karaoke. When everyone's in sync, it's magical. You all belt out the chorus together, voices blending, laughter spilling. But when the timing's off, it turns into a chaotic mess where half the group is belting verse 2 while the rest are still on the bridge. The energy is shared, but the result depends on how well you're all attuned. So how do you cultivate the good kind? By building trust. When people feel safe to share, to stumble, to listen without judgment, the collective intuition strengthens. Synchrony isn't about everyone thinking the same, it's about everyone tuning into the same underlying rhythm, even while bringing their unique parts. It's listening deeply, not just to yourself but to each other. A curious little twist here, researchers have measured heart rate synchrony in groups. In classrooms, students' heartbeats often align when they're fully engaged in a lesson. In choirs, singers' heart rhythms literally sync as they breathe together. This isn't just poetic, it's measurable biology. Your body is designed to harmonize, and intuition rides that wave. And isn't that oddly comforting? That your inner knowing isn't locked in your skull, but stretches outward, connecting with others? It suggests that intuition isn't only about you navigating life solo, it's also about how you move in relation to the people around you. Which means the story doesn't end with science and psychology. Because long before researchers put sensors on choirs or ran lab studies on group flow, people were already talking about this interconnected intuition. They told myths, built rituals, and wrapped it all in mystery. That next chapter, mystics, myths, and echoes across cultures, is where your journey now drifts. You begin to notice how the whispers of intuition didn't start in laboratories or psychology textbooks. They've been woven into human stories for millennia, wrapped in myth, cloaked in ritual, whispered through mystics. Long before EEG machines and fMRI scans, people explained intuition as prophecy, divine guidance, or the voice of ancestors. Whether you see those interpretations as symbolic or literal, they've shaped how entire cultures understood inner knowing. Think of the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. Pilgrims would travel across mountains to hear a woman's cryptic pronouncements, delivered in trance, as if Apollo himself had loaned her his tongue. To the seekers, those words weren't just guesses, they were intuition amplified into holy guidance. Even today, you've probably caught yourself giving extra weight to a gut message, just because it arrived with intensity, like an inner oracle staging its own drama. A quirky historical note, in Norse sagas, women known as Valvas acted as seeresses, using chants and rituals to channel visions. They weren't marginal figures, kings consulted them before battle. Their role reminds you that intuition wasn't considered a private hunch but a force powerful enough to steer entire communities. In some ways, the modern CEO hiring an executive coach for big decisions is just a rebranded Valva consultation, with less chanting and fewer animal pelts. Of course, not all traditions agreed on what intuition was. A long-standing controversy surrounds whether intuition is a divine channel or just a natural human capacity. Mystics framed it as communion with the sacred. Rationalists dismissed it as superstition. And in between, philosophers tried to thread the needle, suggesting that maybe intuition is both, ordinary in mechanism, extraordinary in experience. Take Eastern traditions. In Zen Buddhism, teachers often spoke of satori, sudden flashes of insight that bypass ordinary reasoning. It wasn't about thinking harder, it was about emptying thought until the answer simply appeared. You've had tiny versions of this, like when the solution to a problem clicks in the shower after hours of fruitless effort. Zen just took that everyday flicker and elevated it into a spiritual art. Or look at indigenous cultures, where intuition often takes the form of listening to the land, the animals, the dreams. For many First Nations communities, paying attention to subtle shifts in wind, bird calls, or animal behavior isn't mystical, it's survival, honed into instinct over generations. What scientists call pattern recognition, elders might describe as hearing the earth speak. Different language, same phenomenon, attunement to signals beyond logic. Now, let's bring in a lighter angle, because otherwise this sounds like you need to join a monastery. Intuition has always had its eccentric side too. Did you know Napoleon Bonaparte reportedly made major battle decisions based on dreams? Imagine your general waking up saying, "Guys, I dreamed we should flank left," and everyone just nodding. History is filled with leaders crediting visions, gut hunches, or mystical nudges for their boldest moves. Sometimes it worked brilliantly. Sometimes, well, let's just say intuition has launched both victories and disasters. Still, what's fascinating is how persistent the theme is. From shamans to saints, from fortune tellers to philosophers, people have always trusted that there's a form of knowing that bypasses logic. Even if the packaging changes, from incense smoke to Silicon Valley TED Talks, the core belief remains: intuition is a guide, and sometimes it feels larger than you. You might smile at the modern echoes. When people talk about manifesting or trusting the universe, they're essentially rebranding age-old ideas about listening inward. When athletes point skyward after a big win, it's a ritual of intuition and faith braided together. Even your own aha moments carry that timeless flavor, like plugging into something older than yourself. Here's the playful part: mystics may have dressed it in robes and rituals, but you've experienced the same thing in sweatpants. Ever had that uncanny sense to call a friend, only to hear, "I was just thinking of you"? Or the moment you knew which subway car would have a seat, and it did. You may not burn sage or chant, but the mystic current flows through you too. And while scholars may debate endlessly about whether intuition is sacred or secular, you don't need to solve that riddle tonight. You just notice that across centuries and cultures, people have kept returning to the same truth: intuition feels like guidance from beyond reason. Whether it's a god, a dream, or your own subconscious, the experience matters more than the label. That realization sets the stage for the high-pressure side of intuition. Because beyond myths and mystics, intuition often shows up in the most critical moments: emergencies, leadership calls, creative breakthroughs, when hesitation could cost everything. And that's where your journey drifts next, into the world of intuition under fire. You've wandered through myths, mystics, and the whispers of dreams, and now you find yourself standing at the edge of a sharper terrain, the realm of high-stakes decisions. This is where intuition leaves behind candlelit rooms and cozy journaling sessions, and instead shows up in moments that demand split-second choices, sometimes with lives, fortunes, or futures hanging in the balance. Picture a firefighter rushing into a burning building. There's no time to run a cost-benefit analysis or pull out a calculator. And yet, many firefighters report just knowing when a structure is about to collapse. One study by psychologist Gary Klein highlighted a veteran who ordered his crew out of a house seconds before the floor gave way. When later asked how he knew, he couldn't explain. It was intuition. In truth, his brain had picked up on subtle cues: an unusual silence, heat patterns, the feel of the floorboards. Years of experience translated into a gut reaction that saved lives. A surprising angle: surgeons often describe a similar sense. Some talk about a sixth sense in the operating room, where their hands move almost before they consciously decide, steering them toward a safer cut or away from hidden danger. It's not mysticism, it's embodied expertise, distilled into lightning-fast intuition. Still, when they talk about it, it sounds eerily like listening to a voice that comes from somewhere deeper than thought. This sparks another long-running intellectual tension. Can intuition in high-stakes situations be trusted more than analysis, or should it always be backed by hard data? In aviation, for example, some argue that gut instinct has saved pilots who had no time for procedures. Others counter that over-reliance on instinct leads to catastrophic errors. The controversy remains unsettled, with training programs now trying to blend the two: intuition honed by experience, but checked by protocols. But it's not just about danger. Creativity thrives on intuition under pressure too. Consider composers who claim melodies arrive whole, as if downloaded from nowhere, or entrepreneurs who describe leaps that made no logical sense at the time but later defined entire industries. Steve Jobs once famously called intuition more powerful than intellect, and whether or not you agree, you've likely had your own version of that, making a snap choice that later revealed itself as pivotal. Here's a quirky note: chess grandmasters, those icons of strategic calculation, often rely on gut feelings during games. They don't map out every move 10 turns ahead, they feel when a position is strong or dangerous. In interviews, many describe intuition as their secret weapon, with calculation only serving as confirmation afterward. It's almost comical, an ancient board game showcasing both the power and mystery of gut knowing. And yet, intuition can wobble under pressure too. Think of investors during financial bubbles. Their gut told them the market could only keep climbing, even when logic warned otherwise. Entire economies have suffered from collective misfires of intuition dressed up as certainty. In leadership, too, bad instincts can ripple outward: an impulsive war, a misguided policy, a reckless corporate gamble. Your gut may feel urgent, but urgency isn't always wisdom. That's why learning to discern matters so much. In high-stakes contexts, intuition that comes with calm clarity is often more reliable than intuition that arrives with panic. A general sense of steady knowing can point you true north, while a jittery burst of adrenaline may just be fear in disguise. The difference can't always be measured in the moment, but over time, you begin to feel the distinction. Let's lighten this with a grin. Intuition in daily life sometimes thinks it's more dramatic than it is. You freeze at the fridge, knowing that today is the day you shouldn't eat that questionable leftover pasta. High-stakes decision? Maybe not, but your gut insists it's as serious as a moon landing. You roll your eyes, laugh, and realize your intuition can be both lifesaver and drama queen. What's remarkable is how adaptable intuition is. Under stress, your brain switches gears, shifting resources to the fast-acting systems that fuel instinct. Your senses sharpen, your body buzzes, and suddenly you're operating on hunches rather than deliberation. When trained, this state can save you. When untrained, it can trap you. The key lies in practice, like rehearsing emergencies, refining creative routines, or reflecting on past decisions, so that when the pressure's on, your gut is working with you, not against you. And once you see intuition working in crises, you begin to wonder, if it can guide you in the extremes, how might it shape the ordinary moments too? The small choices, the daily paths, the quiet yes and no that eventually carve the shape of your life? That question carries you gently toward the final step of this journey, living guided by your inner compass, not just in flashes, but as a steady way of being. Now you arrive at the part where intuition becomes less of an occasional guest and more of a roommate, always present, shaping the rhythm of your daily life. It's one thing to marvel at gut instincts in emergencies or creative bursts, but the deeper invitation is to weave intuition into your ordinary decisions: what you eat, where you walk, who you trust, when you rest. The small choices matter, and together they sculpt the entire arc of your days. You start noticing it in simple ways. You walk into a cafe and feel drawn to one corner seat rather than another. You choose the book that catches your eye, even if you can't explain why. You decide to call someone, just because, and that call turns out to be exactly what they needed. These little moments may seem trivial, but they add up into a pattern, a life steered by inner compass rather than outer noise. A classic psychological study on decision-making showed that people who trusted their instincts on complex problems often performed better than those who overanalyzed every detail. Why? Because the brain can only hold so much in working memory, while the unconscious mind processes far more. That quiet nudge you feel isn't just fluff, it's your deeper mind integrating layers of information that logic alone can't juggle. And here's a curious twist. Neuroscientists have found that intuition often correlates with activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region involved in error detection. In other words, part of your intuition is your brain quietly flagging, something's off here, even before you can say why. You might not know the reason, but you feel the signal. Still, this sparks a lingering controversy. Should intuition guide you in everyday life more than logic, or should it always take the back seat? Some scholars argue intuition is ideal for personal decisions, love, art, life direction, while logic should rule financial or technical choices. Others believe the split is artificial, that the best living happens when both collaborate. The argument has no clean resolution, which is probably the point. You're meant to dance between the two, not choose sides. Think of your inner compass as a duet partner. Logic provides the sheet music, intuition improvises the melody. If you lean too far into one, the song feels flat or chaotic. When you let them play together, the harmony carries you forward with both confidence and creativity. Of course, don't be surprised when intuition shows up with its quirks. You'll get hunches that make no sense, turning down a job offer, saying yes to a move, skipping an event, and only later will the meaning reveal itself. Sometimes, though, the hunch is wrong, and you laugh about how your inner compass insisted you buy that trendy gadget now gathering dust. Living by intuition doesn't mean perfection, it means embracing both the hits and the misses with grace. Here's a lighthearted truth: intuition is a little like autocorrect. Often brilliant, sometimes embarrassing, occasionally hilarious. You trust it, but you also double-check before sending. And when it messes up, you roll with it. But when you give it space, you notice something subtle shift. Decisions feel lighter. Paths feel clearer. Even if you don't know where they'll lead, you trust that inner navigation more than the endless chatter of doubt. And that trust begins to soften the edges of your life, reducing the grind of constant overthinking. You might recall how this journey began, with whispers beneath the noise, signals from your body, nudges from dreams, lessons from mistakes, and even the shared rhythm of collective flow. Each piece has been a breadcrumb, and now you see how they all connect. Intuition isn't some mystical add-on, it's part of your design, waiting for you to listen. And so, you carry this into tomorrow. Maybe you journal a dream. Maybe you pause before saying yes. Maybe you walk slower, breathe deeper, notice the small pulls of your body and the subtle yes/no in your chest. Over time, that practice becomes a way of life, a steady dialogue with your own inner knowing. Which brings us to the wind down, where all the pieces gather, soften, and rest. You let your breath slow. The ideas loosen their grip, becoming quieter, lighter, like leaves floating down a stream. You've explored science, symbols, stories, and sparks of intuition under fire, and now it all melts into a simple truth: you've always carried this compass inside you. You don't need to chase it, it's been guiding you all along, even in the moments you doubted it. As the pace of your thoughts eases, you imagine yourself standing at the edge of a calm lake. The surface is smooth, reflecting the last glow of twilight. You toss a pebble, and the ripples spread, gentle, even, dissolving into stillness. That's how intuition works, not a thunderclap, but a widening wave, reaching further than you first notice. There's comfort in that. You don't have to force clarity. You don't have to beg for answers. You simply sit with yourself, breathe, and listen. The signals rise naturally, in their own time, like stars appearing one by one in the night sky. Some shine brighter, some fade, but together they form the constellations that quietly steer your way. And so, you let yourself soften into that awareness. You're not pushing for understanding anymore, you're resting in it. Each exhale unwinds the tension, each inhale carries a little more ease. The room feels quieter, the air feels gentler, your body heavier with rest. Intuition isn't something you chase, it's something you trust. And tonight, as the world outside slows and the night deepens, you trust that your compass is already guiding you, even in silence, even in stillness. You let go. You breathe. You rest. And in the quiet, you are carried.